Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom. How's it going?
Tony, we got to talk to the tight ends today, which is good. But much more importantly, we got to talk to Kevin Wilson today, which is always one of the very best days of fall camp, spring camp, whatever camp.
It's one of those, kind of like when a podcast, when we do like listener questions or something that it does its own work for us. Kevin Wilson is one of those guys. You can give him a little question and he'll go on and give you a lot of detail and a lot of information.
Colorful turn of phrase.
Yes, as opposed to some coaches who will give you almost nothing and will just speak in coach speak. He doesn't speak in coach speak. He speaks in Kevin Wilson speak, which gets the job done for me.
Yeah, it's always interesting. You always come away like there are interview sessions at times where it's just like you can tell whoever it is just is desperately in their head going, don't say anything interesting, don't say anything interesting, don't say anything interesting. That is very much the opposite with Kevin Wilson. Kevin Wilson, maybe this is the former head coach in him where it's just kind of like, when you've run the show somewhere, you're a little more free with, being able to say, knowing what you can say and get away with, and you can probably push boundaries a little bit more. He definitely does not have issues, It's not anything outrageous, but it's just like you get a level of honesty with him that you don't necessarily get with everyone.
Yeah, and it was good to talk to him today. We talked to the tight ends as well. G. Scott, Jeremy Ruckert, Joe Royer, Mitch Rossi. Anybody else? Was it those?
I think those
five.
Yeah,
5 total with Kevin Wilson. And so there's, it's always good to talk to the tight ends at Ohio State. This being Tight End University, this being the year of the tight end. It's good to know that things are still going to continue. One of the fun things about talking to Kevin Wilson is he always gives the media grief because it's always like, are the tight ends going to get the ball this year? Is this the year they're finally going to use the tight ends? And as the tight end coach at Ohio State, and also the offensive coordinator, it's like there's more to the tight end position than catching the ball, which he continually reiterates to us. He tells his players, like, one play you're left tackle and you're going against a defensive end. The next play you are battling against a Jeff Okudah when you're split out. So that gives you the wide range of talent level and skill level that you have to have at the tight end position at Ohio State. And I think what Kevin Wilson would really like to tell people is put some respect on that.
Yeah, well, and you look at the variety of different guys they have at the tight end position. Mitch Rossi is like a block of granite, and Jeremy Ruckert and G. Scott, G. Scott came in as a wide receiver. Both of them were wide receivers. But, G. Scott, Jeremy Ruckert, Mitch Rossi, Cade Stover, none of these people played tight end in high school. So Joe Royer did play tight end in high school, although he might have been a wideout as well. But, these are guys who are kind of like good athletes, and you need the tight end to do so much different stuff that it's like, well, if you're a guy who can block, we can teach you to catch. If you're a guy who can catch, we can teach you to block. You have to be able to do the whole, you have to be the whole package. But there are guys who, seem like maybe you're going to be more the blocking tight end, you're going to be more the receiving tight end, but you do have to be able to do everything within the responsibilities of the position.
Yeah, so let's go through and I guess just touch on each one of the tight ends that we talked to. G. Scott was the first guy that came out, and obviously there's a lot to talk about there. He's up to, I believe, 228 right now. Talking with Kevin Wilson, he said that he always saw, when they were recruiting G. Scott, he saw the potential to be a tight end, but you never know if a player is tough enough. And when, from what he's seen from G. Scott and what G. Scott has said himself, that's not an issue. He is definitely tough enough. G. Scott said he's actually, he fell in love with the position because of the physicality. And this was a guy who I remember seeing, we saw him last year, pushing corners around early on because he was a big guy. And now he gets to block as much, be as physical as he wants to be, as he can, and he gets rewarded for it. And so it's suiting him well. He's growing into it literally and figuratively, but he seems like a really happy guy right now.
Well, and he was someone who, when they started, were sort of talking about that move back in the spring, it was like, well, he's really, really, really going to have to fight to stay at wide receiver size, or he can kind of do what his body kind of clearly wants him to do. He may be one of those people who is just kind of born to be a tight end and just didn't realize it until he got to college. Maybe was fighting it a little bit before he got to college and then got here and it was like, well, the path to the field is probably easier at tight end. Your body is kind of wants to be tight end size. You have the toughness to be a tight end. That's fine. You can do that. And they're he's probably he's probably third on the depth chart right now. It seems like. I mean, Jeremy Ruckert and then Cade Stover seems like he's pretty solidly second, but he's G. Scott's third. They play 3 tight ends. You're going to be on the field this year, like that's an opportunity. And he's at 228 or whatever it was. I mean, that's potentially a real mismatch because he still has he's good size, but he's got good speed. He still has that kind of wide receiver speed. Like that's a potential mismatch if you're going up against a linebacker.
Yeah, G. Scott was asked, do you see yourself as a tight end or a receiver? He said, I am a tight end who runs really good routes. Kevin Wilson said, yeah, he's the lightest of the tight ends, but you put him out here in a bench press, he may be the strongest. Mm-hmm. And so that's a combination that they could work with. G. Scott said he'd like to be maybe in the 230s as an ideal playing weight, but if they get there, they get there. If they don't, they don't. There's still stuff that they can do with them. So it's interesting talking to him. As he did in the spring, like this is not a 2021 decision. This is a 2025, 2030 decision as well, and it's a very mature decision. He talked about just going through this with he's built a relationship with Larry Fitzgerald in the last few weeks because they have shared some similarities. He said that he found out recently that Larry Fitzgerald lost his mom when he was 20, just as G. Scott did, and just happened recently, and so he thought, I need to reach out to this guy. So he got a hold of Richard Sherman and said, hey, can you get me in touch? So he got in touch with Larry Fitzgerald, and now they've been going back and forth, and just what Larry Fitzgerald is talking to him about has nothing to do with football. It's about life and just getting through it and shared experiences. Just a really mature guy that will succeed, here or after football, and just has the right mindset. Yeah,
and if you're willing to kind of make those tough choices, those tough kind of long horizon choices, that sets you up so well for success. Because there is this real temptation to, I came in as a wide receiver, I want to be a wide receiver, and there's things that suggest I might be better off long term tight end, but I really this is what I want to do. There are a couple guys in that room that are like that, where Cade Stover came in. He said basically he played just about everywhere in high school, except for tight end. He never played tight end before he moved to tight end at Ohio State earlier in the year. So that's a big change for him too. But that's where he was a little too big to be a linebacker. Then he was a defensive end, and defensive end is a hard place to get on the field at Ohio State. And he probably could have. He was a good defensive player in high school. He was a good running back in high school. It's like you could kind of do a little bit of whatever. Just kind of again, where is your body taking you? You see G. Scott's about a little under 230. Cade Stover's like 250. Cade Stover is built real solidly, and he is someone who you saw kind of flashes. He had a one-handed catch in the spring game that was, I think, out of bounds. So I don't think it counted, but it was like, this does not look like a guy who is a linebacker just sort of pretending to play tight end. And it's like, okay, that's the part of tight end that I didn't think you could do. Like if you were a linebacker, if you're a defensive lineman, obviously you're not going to shy away from the contact in as a blocker. So that's not really the point. That's not really the cause for concern. It's okay, well, what's the reception going to look like? What is the pass catching going to look like? That solved that problem. It was funny. People were asking him about the transition and do you miss the contact being blowing people up on defense? And someone said tight ends do block in this offense. Oh really? That effect? Is that a thing that happens? How about that?
Today I learned the Ohio State tight ends have to block in this offense. Kevin Wilson said that when they were recruiting Cade Stover, he looked at him and saw a tight end body. And he said, you look at the knees, you look at the hands, you look at the shoulders.
It's like he's judging livestock.
Yeah, but he said that the other coaches wouldn't let him talk to him in recruiting. No, you can't. And it is an interesting thing where it's something you don't necessarily want to bring up to players, like in the recruiting, if they're not already a tight end or that's what they're going to be growing into. Like, yes, everybody wants you to be a receiver, but how about tight end? And it's like a click. Anything else from Cade Stover?
There was a little bit. Speaking of judging livestock, Cade Stover did talk. We did get a chance to talk to him for a few minutes about his family farming. You remember his commitment video? He had like the Ohio State flag on his combine. Some of that stuff, and his background as a farmer has kind of been a part of his story as he's been going through Ohio State and his commitment process and all that. Talked about they raise beef cattle, the Angus cattle. Then they have 300 acres of corn and alfalfa to feed them and that kind of stuff. So just that, and he just talked about the work ethic you learn there. And I mean, you've heard the phrase "country strong." Like that's, you know, there are weight room muscles, and there is like baling hay muscles. Like that's a thing that you know, you work real hard. And he said he works to be the hardest worker on the team. That's something that he really strives for, and that's something that I think it sounds like has really made a difference for him in terms of his preparation and this move into a new position. If you're watching on YouTube and wondering why we suddenly changed locations, the Ohio State women's soccer team was on the indoor facility, and we decided not to get hit in the back of the head with a soccer ball, so now we're moving outside. And now the tight end conversation continues.
Did you talk to Jeremy Ruckert?
I did talk to Jeremy Ruckert. That was, Jeremy Ruckert, always a fun conversation. I mean, he came in. I remember him coming in and us looking at him, and it's like, wow, this dude is skinny. He no longer looks skinny. He is now a very, very solid, probably about 250 again, little kind of about like Cade Stover. Another guy who came in, not as a tight end, came in as kind of a wide receiver and, has kind of learned the tough parts of being a tight end while continuing to maintain, we talked about one-handed catches with Cade Stover. You've seen several of those from Jeremy Ruckert. He was talking about a little bit about the, he's now the leader of the room. There's a lot of teaching that goes on because of all these other guys who are not tight ends by training. But he's kind of taken that leadership role in that room right now. He was asked at one point, what's it like being next to DeJuan Jones on the offensive line? He said, I have never felt smaller in my life. And Jeremy Ruckert is a big dude. Jeremy Ruckert is, 6'5", 250. So he's, I look at Jeremy Ruckert and go, he's big. And then he looks at DeJuan Jones and goes, I am tiny. So that's, yet another, not that you needed another confirmation, but DeJuan Jones, in fact, a large human being.
It is funny every time you see somebody standing next to DeJuan Jones, and not to turn this into a DeJuan Jones show, but it doesn't matter who. And I've said it in the past, Trey LaRue, who's listed like 6'7", 320 or whatever it looks like. Is that the little halfback?
Yeah. You look at. I mean, normally when you're at an Ohio State football practice, like from across the field, you can see these are the walk-ons, because the walk-ons are the ones who are like, like normal human being size. Like, that's a walk-on because he looks like he's my height. DeJuan Jones makes, I saw him standing next to Donovan Jackson at practice, and he makes Donovan Jackson, who's a big dude, he makes Donovan Jackson look like a walk-on, and it's like, oh, wow. So that's not a thing that people normally can do, is be that tall and be that big and be that fast. So anyway, that's why Ohio State's doing crazy stuff on their offensive line. But back to the tight ends.
Well, and maybe, should we speak this into existence in this podcast as well? I did want to ask Kevin Wilson about, what about tight end tackle eligible with DeJuan Jones, but didn't quite get to it because one of the good problems to have when you talk to Kevin Wilson is he talked to us for about 24 minutes and maybe answered like 12 questions in that time because he goes in depth, but didn't quite get to ask the most important question of the day.
Really, the only question.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then we do talk to Kevin Wilson. Talk about the offense as a whole, talk about the scrimmage that is coming on Saturday. You mentioned this before the show, before we started recording. Like this has been building up. This scrimmage has been hyped, and Ryan Day said it's going to be very important. This Wednesday was important for that. They were doing some red zone stuff, I believe. And then you've got Saturday with the scrimmage, the first scrimmage. Going to know so much more. Going to have maybe a quarterback decision. And then you ask Kevin Wilson about the importance of Saturday. He's like, well, we'll see how it goes, and then we'll see after that, and we'll make some decisions after, and then he still got another scrimmage. And it wasn't like he let the air out of the balloon, but it was like, you could have told us, you could have given us a little bit more drama.
Well, and I still think, the timeline that Ryan Day has given was they want to kind of know what they're doing with the quarterback at the end of week 2. And Ryan Day talked earlier this week about this being week 2. So it wasn't like, we're kind of defining terms differently because we started in the middle of last week. So that wasn't really week 1. This is a full week 1. It's the first full week. Like, no. That's not. I still think we're probably that's kind of what the plan is. They may not. I'm not anticipating a press release coming out of Ohio State on Sunday morning saying, here's who the starting quarterback is. I think they're going to have a pretty good sense by this weekend. So, and nothing has to be in stone by the end of this weekend. Maybe you take another week and you really are thinking about it, but that's probably at that point kind of confirmation. And here's the thing. If next week we're at practice and we say CJ Stroud continue to rep first, that's going to tell me something. If we see they're continuing to run the same offensive line that they've been running, that also is going to tell me something. Unless you see a major change, you sort of have to assume this is the status quo, and this is almost certainly what the situation is going to be when they take on Minnesota in less than 3 weeks.
I ran some, I guess you'd call it maybe subterfuge, or I asked a question to get an answer that I knew I wouldn't get, Tom. And I asked Kevin Wilson if there was just one thing that could come out of this scrimmage and be settled and you would have an answer on it, what would it be? And he did not say quarterback. Mm-hmm. So, Tom, does that mean quarterback is settled? Because wouldn't you sure want to know who's going to be the quarterback of this team? And for him to not say, I would like to know that we're settled at quarterback, does that mean he already thinks they are? Or maybe does it just mean we've got 3 guys we can win with?
I think they know who their quarterback is. That is my sneaking suspicion, that they know who their quarterback is, even if they haven't had an official conversation, because I feel like the answer hasn't really changed going back into the spring. So if the answer hasn't changed going back into the spring, I'm not sure what's going to happen in the next week to change it. But yeah, I mean, he talked about the answer to that question was toughness. He wants to see toughness on Saturday, and it's like that's also a good thing, because he talked a lot about. He was asked about when you were playing, there was 2-a-days, and he said actually 3-a-days, and they don't do that anymore. That is a safety thing. You've got new rules on restricting how many practices you can have in a day, and so camp is much more spread out than it used to be. And he talked about some of the reasons that's good, and they've actually put some additional padding on, like spider pads, which are kind of like a lightweight kind of thing, almost like a 7-on-7, like those 7-on-7 helmets, but in kind of pad form, I think. And they turn that, that allows them to. Before, offensive linemen were getting like helmets in their collarbones because there was no pads at all. It's like, well, this is the worst practice of the whole fall because we have no pads on at all, and you still have to actually do some work. So they've, by adding some more padded, light padding, that has made stuff safer. But he said this is an opportunity for toughness. We have not seen a ton of tackling. You used to, back in the day, it was just tackle. You're not seeing that anymore. There's a lot of, when they're working on tackling, they're doing it on top of like big pads, big mats, that kind of stuff. The scrimmage on Saturday is an opportunity for them to tackle and to really, an opportunity to take guys to the ground, an opportunity to see which running backs can break tackles, all that kind of stuff. That's an opportunity you don't have. You've got 25 practices, but you're only going to have limited opportunities to do that and to really get used to tackling. I mean, we saw at the beginning of last season, there were a lot of teams that didn't tackle or didn't have a lot of, full contact practices because of COVID restrictions. And, I go back to the beginning of last year, week 1, it was like Navy and BYU, and Navy had done no tackling at all during fall camp, and it was like 55-3 BYU because Navy couldn't remember how to tackle people like that. That's a thing. You do have to practice. That there's a reason they practice things, and it's so that they're ready to do it during the game. And if you do hear wind, we apologize. We did have to move outside. We are under a tent to try and limit the wind, but we are, it is still a little breezy out here. So we started inside due to to avoid wind and bird noises and all that kind of stuff, and then we did have to move outside. And now
we're still getting seagull noises.
We're getting seagull noises, even though we're underneath the tent, and a little bit of wind too. So we'll apologize for that. But if you've heard this podcast before, none of this is a surprise.
It sure isn't. Kevin Wilson was talking about the quarterbacks, and he was asked, "Do you need them to be part of the running game?" And he said, "It's always good for the threat to be there." But not just the threat of the run, but the ability to extend plays. And Justin Fields was great at that. And he said Dwayne Haskins was actually really good at it in the pocket and was able to get out of the way and turn blank into chicken salad. And then I asked him, well, how's the chicken salad from these guys? And he said it's pretty good. And he went into, his wife is vegan and they have vegan A's. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound like very good chicken salad to me. But he did mention that they have some Duke's mayo in the fridge as well, and that'll get the job done. But
he also said he wasn't sure whether this was going to be pickles or celery. Yes. I don't think I've ever had pickles in chicken salad before. That's a new one. I'm a little intrigued by that.
It gives it a little bit more bite. And it's like you chop it up the same size as the celery, but it's just, a little bit more. I mean, a little bit more kick. Especially, you're going to need the kick if you're going with the vegan A's.
I'm listening. Until you say vegan A's, I'm listening. I'm intrigued. But I'm sorry. Go on. Let's talk a little bit about football. That's enough culinary talk for today.
And so you got the quarterbacks who are all similar enough to be able to do whatever is asked of them, and then can also make plays out of the pocket or even in the pocket, but just getting out of trouble, provided time they can see over the offensive line.
Yeah, and that's going to be really interesting this year because you've got the taller offensive line, and you don't have a Tate Martell this year. Like all the guys this year are like a legitimate 6 foot, 6'2", something like that. So, you don't have the guy who's 5'11" with air quotes, like. So it's a little bit less of a concern, but it is going to be. I mean, that's going to be really interesting. Now, the convex of that, the other side of that is, so you have a running back who's Mayan Williams size. Like that's someone who you got a bunch of tackles who are 6 foot a bunch, and you got a running back who is 5'11", then. That's a guy who, you remember Darren Sproles just kind of getting lost behind offensive lines and just like popping out and exploding. Like there are some pros there too. So, but yeah, that's going to be something that just kind of bears watching. Like, do quarterbacks have the throwing lanes that they want to have because those guys are so tall?
I think it was Dallas Gant yesterday was asked, how hard is it to see the running back behind this line? He's like, it's really, really difficult to find the running back, find the ball behind this offensive line. Kevin Wilson was talking about the toughness aspect, and Mayan Williams being a guy who they've only seen a little bit, and Kevin Wilson senses that Mayan Williams gets better the more he gets the ball, but you can't do that in practice. And so I asked him, like, how much do you really know about a running back until you show it to you in a game where they get 6-8 carries on a drive, and you get an idea, but until you see that toughness and that. How are they in the fourth quarter? Because he thinks Mayan Williams is just going to get better as the game goes on, and I think we would agree with him that's something that I've even mentioned, you've mentioned, we want to see him with 25 carries. What does he look like in the fourth quarter? Because when he's wearing teams down, what does it look like for him? What does it look like for the defense? And so there's that. He mentioned the running backs, and he said, I don't know which order he said, whether it was Mayan or Master, and then he said, and then the young guy, and then he said Marcus Crowley. So the young guy, to me, I'm going to assume is Travion Henderson. He did say Evan Pryor is really turning it on right now, but it seems like what we maybe said yesterday, or maybe said for a podcast this weekend, the top three right now continues to seemingly be Mayan Williams, Master Teague, and Travion Henderson.
Yeah, and it's like those three guys, and it's in some order, but it seems like there's those three guys, and then there's a big gap, and those three guys are not necessarily all it's not necessarily always ABC. It's sometimes it's CBA or ACB or whatever, but it's the same three guys, and that tells me there's a top three, and then there's the other guys, and that there's an intriguing conversation there about like what does that mean for the future of Marcus Crowley. He was very effusive in his praise about Evan Pryor. So as a true freshman coming in, like that's not if you're fourth or fifth, that's not necessarily a huge red flag. Marcus Crowley's been here. This is his third year now, and if you're fourth or fifth, then it's like, well, this is an important time for you to make a move because you're not getting any younger. So and he had that real bad knee injury in 2019, and the recovery was not what they wanted it to be. He didn't come back as quickly and as 100% as I think they were hoping he would. So that's a concern, and you hope you don't want to see, because he was off to a great start as a true freshman. You don't ever want to see a guy potentially have his career get kind of sidetracked by an injury. But that's something that's going to kind of be worth keeping an eye on.
A couple of minor housekeeping injury type of things. Thayer Munford, he's going to be fine. Didn't practice necessarily much yesterday. Kevin Wilson said it's not an issue. Garrett Wilson was also given kind of the day off yesterday. Kevin Wilson said that Mick Marotti came and said, like, Garrett Wilson has had like the most work of anybody in the summer, so it's okay to dial him back a little bit. And so that's what that was about. And so this is the kind of stuff that happens in camp, especially with veterans and guys who, I think they're okay with Garrett Wilson. Like, I think if you want to give him day 7 or day 8 off and just have him jog around, I think you're going to be okay. Yeah,
he's not someone who, really needs to work on refining his technique. He's not someone who really needs to work on learning the playbook. Yes, you're going to want him to have as many reps as possible with the new quarterback, because this is not Justin Fields this year. This is someone new who's going to be throwing to him, but he's had all spring, he's had all summer, he's had the first 7 days of fall camp at that point. So, he is probably comfortably, safely in the 2,000 rep club. So that's someone who you can get away with not necessarily pushing to the absolute limit at all times.
And even if it's only 1,500, it's fine.
It rounds up. It's fine.
Yeah. So that was the receivers. They're all doing fine. Tight ends, of course, doing well. Offensive line, I mean, he's not committal like I think all of the coaches are about what it's actually going to be. Is it going to be Juwan Jones and Nick Petit-Frere, and more will be known eventually. But I'm not changing. Like I have now bought in on that lineup, and maybe it will change. But until it does, I guess I'm here to stay with it. Yeah,
I mean, at this point in camp, if it's been the status quo for more than a week,
right,
that's what it is. Until you see something else, that's what it is. This is not a one day on a whim, like, well, we'll try something crazy today. Like, no, this is what it is until you see otherwise. We have not yet seen otherwise.
And Matt Jones or Luke Whippler or Josh Fryer would have to take these next 2 weeks, or maybe this next week, because you can't keep the battle going into game week. Mm-hmm. But they would have to be outstanding, like Juwan Jones was, mm-hmm. to force somebody's hand. And I, right now it would be hard for like a Matt Jones to play better than Thayer Munford right now. And although he's getting a chance, like if Thayer Munford's going to be out, this would be an opportunity for Matt Jones to make his mark. But yeah, we'll see.
I would also be interested to know if Thayer Munford's out, so it is an opportunity for someone else to play at left guard. But if Nick Petit-Frere misses a practice or just sits out with load management or whatever, I would be interested in who do they put in his place. Do they kick Thayer Munford back out at the left tackle, or is that like Enoch Vermahi's at left tackle? Because if I saw Enoch Vermahi at left tackle and Thayer Munford staying at guard, that would tell me everything I possibly needed to know about this. But I'm sure Nick Petit-Frere also needs as many possible reps at left tackle, so he's probably not someone who's on load management 2,000 rep club.
And Thayer Munford may need as many as possible at left guard.
Yeah.
But it would be interesting if Thayer Munford kicks out. Do you use that opportunity to give Matt Jones a shot, or do you just we need Thayer to get solidified, and so that's where we're going to keep him? Maybe bring that up to the coaches, Tom, and see if they give you any kind of answer.
Yeah, coaches love answering hypotheticals, especially hypotheticals about injuries, especially things that they know would probably tip you off about position things they're not ready to talk about yet. If all the different ways a question wouldn't get asked, that might just hit the bingo card all by itself.
Just get up and coach just walks off because you've done it. You've defeated the final boss with your terrible question. And yes, the hypotheticals, if you want to get shot down quicker than you did back in college, mm-hmm. Just ask about some hypotheticals. Say, and as soon as you say, it's like boom. Once you get the shoulder shimmy in there, and it's like, no, we're not doing this hypothetical stuff. We're focused on focused on getting better today, winning the day, going 1-0 on the day. We can't think about 13 years down the road. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that's who's the most dangerous opponent on your schedule? Well, it's the next one we play. Coincidentally, it's the next one we play. Mm-hmm. And so that's not. You're not. You have. I have over the years tried at Big Ten Media Days to ask all sorts of different players about the third game on their schedule. It's like no, we're not. It's like no. There's just some stuff that I know you know the answer to this question, but you are not going to give me the answer to this question. So therefore,
did you ask a lot of the Buckeyes about Akron?
Isn't I believe Tulsa is the third game of the season this year? Yes.
Big Tulsa questions. Did you?
Yeah, there was just a couple of years ago. There was Ohio State was going to Nebraska in the end of September, and I was asking them about that, and it's like we got to worry about Colorado. And as it turned out that year, I believe they did need to worry about Colorado. So so they may have been the correct answer.
The good news is the first game this year was Minnesota, so there's quite a few questions about that one from mainly the Minnesota people, but still. Anything else from today? I'm trying to think about everything that Kevin Wilson said, and it was a lot. Like I said, it was over 20 minutes, but I think we've touched on most of it. The running backs, again, I think they're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Receivers seem to be okay. Kevin Wilson was asked about the same thing Ryan Day was about you can do anything with this offense. And Wilson said the same thing as Day. You can't get bogged down in trying to come up with every single play and teach every single play and think the players can handle every single play. Because, again, Tom, I don't know if you know this, none of these quarterbacks in that building have thrown a single pass in a college football game.
That can't be right.
No, it is true.
Are you sure?
And
that feels like something we would have heard before now.
Although when they do add Quinn Ewers, that will raise the total from 0 to also 0.
Ah, okay. Interesting. Quinn Ewers is not officially in the Ohio State student directory, but there's a report on our Ask the Insiders board that he is enrolled, and we will see if he shows up Saturday or Monday or whatever. But sounds like that is going to happen. We're at practice next Monday, Tuesday.
Yes.
So we're at practice at some point early next week, so we will quite possibly have some Quinn Ewers for you, and I don't know, do an emergency podcast on his hair or something. We'll see.
Have to do something.
We'll see what we get access to, but yeah, that'd be interesting.
You know what would be a good morning scoop for you when now you're doing the segments and you're cutting up some sound. Every question about Quinn Ewers and every non-answer about Quinn Ewers. And then people can get an example of what it's like trying to ask people questions about stuff you're interested in.
Yeah, stuff that people want to read about that they don't want to talk about, yes. Episode titles. So you want to be a sports writer.
Maybe just a bonus type of thing, just so people can get an idea. Anything else?
I think that covers it. We'll have plenty more over the weekend. Nevada Buck is my guest on the Saturday Morning Scoop episode. We already recorded that, talking a little bit about conference realignment and some of the stuff, but he promised me on there he's going to have an insider practice report, which, I mean, yes, technically he has an insider practice report for every single practice. For the scrimmage, apparently it's going to be there, so you'll have to be on the Ask the Insiders board to find out what's going on inside that scrimmage, because we're not going to be in there, no other media is in there, so that's the only place you're going to find that information, and it's on the Ask the Insiders board at buckeyescoop.com.
And I'm under the impression that there's going to be some Quinn Ewers news coming as well, and not just the enrollment part, but perhaps an actual conversation with him on at buckeyescoop.com as well here in the next couple of days, so keep an eye on that. Again, youtube.com/buckeyescoop for all videos like this. And we thank you guys. Have a good weekend. We will talk to you next week.